Hey everybody, my name's Adam. I'm an amateur artist. This is Egum. He's a professional cheeseburger eater. Let's go draw some stuff. Right, bud? All right. Hi everyone, thank you for stopping by my channel. My name's Adam. As I mentioned in the intro, I am an amateur artist, and I say that with the utmost sincerity and earnestness. I've been drawing my whole life, but I only recently, within the last 6 months or so, started to finally develop my own style. I've always been emulating other folks that I liked and that I admired, but I never really spent time sitting and developing my own style. So I created this channel as a place to share what I've learned, and I ask a lot of questions of other artists, and when they respond, I'm so thankful and grateful for that, because that's how you learn. And you learn by asking questions, you learn by studying, which is another thing that I've done a lot of over the last 6 months. So I wanted to create this channel and share what I've learned, but also to ask questions and to answer questions. And hopefully this can be a space where we can all kind of learn together as we go. So this is not a refined, I'm not a great artist. This is not a refined artist channel. But it is a place, like I said, that I hope that we can learn from each other. So if you're a beginner, this is a perfect place for you. Now what you're seeing here is I do illustrations of my animals. Egum, you met him in the intro. And then Mooj, who was before him, and then Mother Fluffer, my three-legged cat. And I do illustrations with them. And my dream this year, my goal this year, is to finally publish my first children's book in a series about them. But another thing that I love is the 80s. And so, and I love drawing 80s characters with 3D glasses on them. So what you're seeing here is Big Bird and his best friend Snuffleupagus from Sesame Street, and I'm going to be throwing some 3D glasses on them for my 3D glasses series that I do. So what you're seeing here is the sketch, and every drawing that I do, I sketch out. I don't start with pen, I start with pencil, and here I'm just using a mechanical pencil and all my mechanical pencils are very affordable on Amazon, so I don't spend a lot of money on supplies at all. I like to see what you can do with what you have, your means, and what's available to you. Maybe before, and like I said, I'm an amateur, so why spend the money? So I've got a mechanical pencil here. I'm sketching out Big Bird and Snuffleupagus. I'm focusing on shapes. I started with circles for the head, which is usually where I start, and then I add the body and the arms. With this one, we're dealing with a bird and an elephant, basically. So what you're going to see and what you're looking at is just the loose outline of their bodies. There's not a lot of detail at this point. However, I will get a little more detailed with my pencil as this goes on, and then even more detailed with the inks, and then I'll be coloring it. Now, one thing I also want to say and warn you about is that I'm still working on the position of my camera, and it's gonna come up a lot, me being an amateur, because I am, and that's why I wanted to put that at the beginning of the video. I'm still learning where good placement is for the camera, and here I'm kind of comfortable with where it is at this point. You can see what I'm doing. There's a couple times where when I get into more detail with the pencil, where my hand covers it up, and I apologize for that. But I think I sped through that footage a little bit quicker than the rest of it. And with that, I think that's a question that I ask almost every artist that I really admire is, what is your setup? And how are you sitting? And where is your camera? And as far as YouTube goes and making videos, I think that's something that could be very valuable to a beginner like myself or anybody else out there who's watching. So at this point, I've got basically the entire basics, the foundation of my picture that I'm drawing, and I'm going to start getting into a little bit more detail with the pencil, because I've got all my shapes down. I've got the position. Another thing that I like to focus on is where my characters are on the page, and similarly with the position of the camera. And I don't know if I mentioned it or not, but I don't like to work for the camera. I like to just be free and loose and comfortable while I'm drawing. Now here I've sped up the footage just a little bit because I'm going to go into a little bit more detail with my pencil before I get into the inks. And that's so that when I do lay down my inks, or at least start to go into them, that I don't get lost. I think it's important, for me anyway, to not only sketch out the shapes and the general area on the page where my characters are going to be, but also to make sure that I've got a little bit of detail in there with my pencil, so that when I'm doing the inks, I'm not just winging it. Now here we've got a little bit of a different angle, and this is where my hand starts to get in the way, but I do make an effort to show each progressive change with the photo, with the picture, the drawing. And at this point I've got all of my pencil details finished. I've got the 3D glasses in place where their eyes would be, and even though I'm putting 3D glasses on these guys, I still draw the eyes at least where they would be, and little like placeholders. And Snuffleupagus has pretty big eyes compared to Big Bird. And I've started in with the inks. Now I'm using a Micron, I think a number 1 Micron Pigma ink marker, and I use these because they are, for the most part, really good at being waterproof. So if I wanted to go and watercolor this, I could. You'd want to let it sit for a certain, like maybe 5-10 minutes before you do go into watercolors. But on this one, I'm going to be using my Copic sketch markers. I really love Copics. I love watercolor. Watercolor is one of the most relaxing things that I do in my day. But I love experimenting with Copics, and in a lot of ways they act like paints, the way that you can blend them, the way that they flow. And I don't know, I really enjoy them. You can in their alcohol-based markers, so you can find different kinds of markers similar to Copics. And I'll go into more of that when I start coloring. So here I'm finished. I'm halfway through with the inks, I'd say. I sped up the footage just a little bit because I'm doing so many details on the feathers of Big Bird. And when you're doing inks, you can't undo the inks. So a lot of people go right into the inks and start sketching with the pen. And that's just not something I'm comfortable with at this point. But I do love the idea of being able to get to that stage in my artistic abilities. But for now, I just like using these ink pens, and I've got a couple different brands, but the Microns are the ones that I love the most, and you can get them in so many different sizes. And usually to my first layer over my pencils, I usually use either the 1 or the .001, which is ultra fine. Here I'm doing all of the hairs on Snuffleupagus. I did all the feathers on Big Bird. I'm going back through and just making sure I hit every spot, and then I'm erasing my pencils now.
Egum, how you doing, buddy? Did you just have a good dinner? Hey, look who else is here. There's Mother Fluffer. Hey. All right. Very nice. Okay, good boy. It's good to see you.
So that was Egum and Mother Fluffer. I like to check in on them every once in a while, make sure they're doing all right, let you guys see them. So now we're getting into the colors, and I've sped it up here a little bit because I'm doing block colors, is what I like to call them right now, which is I'm just whatever the most used color in the picture. I just want to lay down that first layer, and I just used a very pale yellow for Big Bird, and I'll be using a brown for Snuffleupagus. Now here I've got a darker shade of yellow, and shading is something that I found is extremely obviously, maybe not obviously, but something I've learned is so important to give your picture depth is shading, and you can do shading multiple different ways. When you're watercoloring, you leave color out to make a highlight to show where light is coming from and light on an object, and then you can paint darker as you go. You kind of go in reverse. With markers, you can go either way. I like to lay down the light color, and what you see I'm doing, I'm switching back and forth between a lighter yellow and the darker yellow. I'm taking the darker yellow and I'm outlining the where the shadow would be under each feather. And then the reason I'm switching back is I'm grabbing, as soon as I do a section of the feathers, I'm grabbing the lighter yellow to blend the darker yellow in, so it's not such a stark line of dark yellow. Copic markers work that way, like I mentioned earlier, like paints, where you can do a dark yellow line and then grab a lighter yellow and sort of pull the color out in a direction and have it fade from dark to light instead of just being a dark line. Either way could look good. It could be what you want. Maybe you do want a darker line and more of a contrast. But for this, I'm doing almost like a gradient. As I do the dark line with the darker yellow, and then I use the lighter yellow to pull it in a direction, and it fades in that direction from darker to light, giving you the effect of a shadow from a feather on Big Bird. And I'll be doing the same thing on Snuffleupagus. Another way, and you'll see me do this later, to shade is with grayscale, even on color drawings like this, which is what I'll be doing just to enhance the darker yellow and the darker brown that I'll be using. It sort of brings everything together and blends everything together. And as I mentioned, I'm going to block out these big brown areas where Snuffleupagus, that's his biggest color. And then I'm going right into the 3D glasses, laying down the blue and the red. I always put my blue on the right side, or the right eye, I guess. And then the red is on the left eye, because I have two pairs of 3D glasses, and they both are different. So I don't know, the way that I settled on it was just blue on the right and red on the left. Now I'm going in with the feet. I'm using an orange on Big Bird's legs and his feet, and I'll be adding some shadow and some highlights with white later on. I love the contrast of Big Bird, and he is pretty much just bird colors, or maybe similar to like a chick, like a baby chick, in his color scheme of yellow body and orange legs, and then he's got his red mouth. I used a reference picture on Google Images for this image because I'd never drawn these two before, and a lot of times when I do these when I add to my 3D glasses series, I'll find a reference image and study it and maybe draw it, and then usually I'll go and do my own version of it once I know the character well enough. But this was being my first time drawing these two. I wanted to use a frame from the show because I loved the show as a kid. So maybe somebody will recognize this frame. So here I'm going over similarly with the dark yellow and the lighter yellow. I'm doing a darker brown and a lighter brown on Snuffleupagus. And at first it comes off as pretty stark of a contrast from the dark to the lighter brown. But once I start going in there with the lighter brown back and forth and pulling that color away from the shadow line of his trunk or his nose or his his legs and his feet, you'll see the how it blends. So this is what I mentioned with using grayscale. I have these Tombow, it's a set of Tombow grayscale markers, and I love them. My brother got these for me a few years ago now, and this is my second pack because I use them so much. I went through the one already. And these have from the lightest light gray to a jet black and everything in between. I think there's maybe 10 or 11 markers in there. And what I'm doing is I'm just kind of like extending that gradient that I talked about even more from the dark brown to the light brown areas. And some of the light brown areas I'm leaving the light brown. I'm not putting any gray in there. And I'm doing the same with Big Bird. I'm adding just a little bit to enhance some of the darker yellow areas, and between his toes, right under his body where his legs meet his feet, where his legs meet his body, there's more of a shadow there. There's more of a shadow under his beak, between his tail feathers, but not so much the feathers on his body. There I'm doing his underarm, so there would be a bigger shadow, a darker shadow under his arm that I think would be more gray. And then where they're leaning together on Snuffleupagus's body, where Big Bird is creating a shadow, I'm using the gray on there as well. Now this Prismacolor set of colored pencils, my mom got these for me, and they're great. It's a great set. I've only recently started using them over my markers or over my watercolors. I love layering. I want to give a shout out to Jackson Davis. I think it's at Jax Davis Art on Instagram. He's an amazing artist, and he was the first that I saw to use colored pencils in this way of giving highlight to your markers, and I love what he does with it. And that's another example of learning and observing, and not just like becoming stagnant in your artistic abilities. Look at what other people are doing, and maybe emulate it at first, but then use it and work it into your own style. And there's so many different ways to use markers, pencils, inks, all paints, all in one picture, in one piece. So what I've picked out is sort of four different shades of pink, and then a darker blue. And I just brought out the hairs of Snuffleupagus, and if you look at pictures of him, the actual puppet, that's what he has. He has pink and blue and all kinds of stuff, hairs going on his body. Just before that, or right after that, I just enhanced a little bit of the inks where they'd kind of faded with the colors I was adding. And now I'm using my gel pen, my white gel pen, to bring out some highlights in his hair and around his body to show a little bit of light shining on him. And you'll see me, this is a 5, so this is the smallest tip that you can get with these gels. You'll see me wipe it on my finger, and that's because it can get clogged up a little bit as you're using it, and I'm just kind of like getting it started, getting it going again, because I didn't have a sheet of paper next to me, so I always use my finger. Even when I'm painting, I paint on my finger or my thumb. But these gel pens are my favorite as far as white highlights. I think they're amazing. You just have to get them going and kind of work with them, and don't press hard with them. Definitely, you want a lighter touch as far as those go. I'm doing the same over on Big Bird. You'll see me come back and forth every once in a while with inks or markers, just to touch up and maybe fill in gaps or fix certain things. And one of the best things about these white pens is you can use them almost as erasers to fix mistakes. So I had a little brown bleed over onto Big Bird's hand on the yellow, and I used the white to go over that brown where it bled, and it just gave it a highlight, and it got rid of the brown on his hand. And I also do that around their bodies on the outside, where I might have colored outside the lines, so to speak, or literally colored outside the lines that I drew. And you can use the white. I think I'm using the 10 on this right there. Here's the 10. I'm coming in with the 10. And with the 10, there's a 5, an 8, and a 10. I don't use the 8s much because there's something weird about them and the ballpoint. But right now, like I just said, using it as an eraser, almost literally, or whiteout, I'm going over the areas on the white areas of the 3D glasses where the red and the blue or the brown bled onto the white, because you want that. I want those 3D glasses, the white part, to be very stark white. And it's amazing what you can do. You know, if you mess up, I feel like you can almost always fix whatever you think your mistake is, with marker, pen, ink, whiteout, whatever it is. There's usually a way to do it. But like Bob Ross said, you know what? There's no mistakes. Happy little accidents. And he was a genius and a pro at turning a mistake into something that he meant it to be there, you know. So he's another one that I absolutely love. Bob Ross, grew up with him, grew up watching him. I didn't know him. So here, this is kind of like the final step. Once I've gotten all of my highlights and shading, shadows, all that stuff's done, then I take a thicker ink, and this Micron I believe is a 5. Sometimes I use an 8 depending on how big. If I'm doing just like a bust from the chest up, I'll use an 8 maybe, but here I'm using a 5, and I'm just going around parts of one side of the characters. So I'm going around the left side of or my left of the drawing where I'm holding it with my hand, and I'm going around, and it just gives it a bolder, stark line, a defining line, and I like that. I'm doing that also on Big Bird's right side or the left side of the drawing. I'm doing that as well, so you can see more of a separation, more of a contrast of where he ends and Snuffleupagus begins. Especially because it's darker over there on Snuffleupagus in between them. I want that black line in there. And now I'm using a number 1 instead of the 5 to just kind of do the same thing, but with a thinner line on Big Bird to separate his tail feathers, and going around the 3D glasses to make sure that those are all clearly defined, and to give them a little bit more depth. Every once in a while you'll see me lift up the paper and swipe something. I always have a scratch sheet underneath or next to me, and that's just to check and see the color, what it's going to look like before I put it on, the thickness of a line, to get my white gel pen going. It's good to have a piece of paper next to you or around you as you go. And then I'm just kind of finishing up making those the lines of the 3D glasses with my number 1 there on Big Bird, and any touch-ups using my finger again. And I'm using the 5 on Big Bird's glasses because it's smaller, and then the 10 with the bigger ballpoint. And then the last thing that I ended up doing is adding a little bit more shade and a shadow under their feet, which I think is important, and I haven't quite gotten the hang of it. But these ended up actually being some of my better ones. Right where they're standing. You never know, his tail feathers extend out. He's touching Snuffleupagus. So it's like, how big do you make that shadow at their feet? And I find that less is more. Less is always more, and you can always add more. But if you put too much, you can't necessarily take it away. Or you could with the white, depending on the color of your paper. But here I just put a little shadow under each foot, so 3 for Snuffleupagus, since you can't see the 4th, and then 1 block of shadow for Big Bird there. And I'm using a pretty light gray Tombow there to do that with, which is what I usually like to do, because I can layer that and make it darker if I need to. And then the last thing is to sign it. Sign your work. I signed mine, and that's the finished piece. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I really enjoyed doing this piece and adding it to my 3D glasses series. And for my first video, this was a lot of fun. Videos are very arduous and hard to make, but I appreciate you all sitting with me, and I'll see you on the next video. Thanks for stopping by. Sit, Muji, sit. Good dog.